Today, I'll be narrating the most important rule at my job is to never create a physical record by GamalFrank. It started 6 months ago. I was fresh out of grad school with a master's in history, a mountain of debt that gave me nightly anxiety attacks, and a resume that was getting ignored by every museum and university in a 3-state radius. I was applying for everything: retail, data entry, barista. I was about 2 weeks from having to crawl back to my parents' spare room when I saw the ad. It was discreet, posted on a high-end academic job board I'd forgotten I even had an account for. Archival Associate, the foundation. Discretion, precision, and an exceptional capacity for recall are paramount. No formal experience required. Generous compensation. Generous was an understatement. The salary they listed was more than my parents made combined. I figured it was a typo or a scam, but I was desperate, so I polished my CV and sent it in, not expecting to hear back. They called me the next day. The woman on the phone had a smooth voice, but with a weight to it. She didn't ask me about my experience or my degree. She asked me a series of bizarre questions. When you were 10, what was the pattern on the wallpaper in your grandmother's kitchen? Describe the cover of the third book you see when you picture your childhood bookshelf. What was the name of the street sign you passed just before turning onto your current road this morning? Luckily for me, my brain is just sticky. Details cling to it, and I know for a fact that it's a photographic, sensory thing. I can close my eyes and walk through my grandmother's house, feel the cool linoleum under my feet, smell the potpourri she kept in a bowl on the sideboard. I answered her questions and she said, "Please be at this address tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. Dress for an interview." The address was a downtown monolith, a skyscraper with no name on the facade, just an elaborate interlocking symbol with heavy bronze doors that looked like a stylized knot. The lobby was a cavern of marble and silence. The air was cool and still, like a cathedral. A man in a simple, perfectly tailored gray suit met me and led me to an elevator, then up to a floor that had no button. He used the key. The interview was with a man I now know only as the supervisor. He was ageless, with pale eyes that seemed to look right through me. He explained the job. It was simple, he said, deceptively so. Each day I would be given a single photograph. My task was to study that photograph from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I was to absorb it, to commit every single detail to memory. The play of light, the grain of the image, the expression on the faces, the stitching on a coat, the cracks in a sidewalk, the reflection in a window. "You will become the living record," he said, his voice with a low hum. "You will not write anything down. You will not make any copies. You will not discuss your work with anyone. At 5 o'clock, I will collect the photograph and you will watch me incinerate it. The Foundation's motto is Quaedam Optime Memorandum. Some things are better remembered." It was the strangest job I'd ever heard of, but the debt was on my chest, and the number on the contract he slid across the mahogany desk could change my entire life. I signed. My workspace was in a vast circular room that felt like a panopticon. Dozens of identical wooden corrals were arranged in concentric rings, all facing a central pillar. Each corral was a small, 3-sided booth with a comfortable chair, a desk, and a single lamp. There were maybe 30 other people in the room, but the only sound was the soft rustling of clothing and the low, ever-present hum of the building's climate control. No one spoke. No one even looked at each other. They were all just like me, heads down, focused with an intensity that was almost unnerving. They had the same look I saw in the mirror every morning, a mixture of intelligence and quiet desperation. The first photograph was of a dusty, empty ballroom, ornate, peeling plasterwork on the ceiling, a single chandelier draped in cobwebs. Sunlight streamed through a grimy arched window, illuminating a universe of dancing dust motes. That was it. For 8 hours, I just looked. I memorized the way the shadows fell, the specific pattern of the water stains on the far wall, the number of crystal pendants missing from the chandelier, 17. At 5 p.m., the supervisor came, took the photo with a pair of tongs, and I followed him to a small, soundproof room containing a sleek, modern furnace. He unlocked it, slid the photo inside, and pressed the button. A soft whir, a flash of orange light, and it was gone. He nodded at me, and I went home. The days fell into a rhythm. A new photo every morning. A wedding party from the 1920s. The bride smiled just a little too tight. A grimy factory floor. Men in flat caps staring grimly at a piece of machinery. A desolate stretch of highway at dusk. A single abandoned car with its door hanging open. A crowded market in a city I couldn't place. Faces blurred with motion except for one small child staring directly at the camera. Their expression utterly blank. They were all unlabeled. No dates, no location, no context. Just moments, frozen and silent. My colleagues remained phantoms. We'd nod sometimes in the elevator or the sterile break room where we'd microwave our sad solitary lunches, but we never spoke. It was a rule, and a powerful one. It was as if we were all part of some silent monastic order. I saw a woman who couldn't have been older than me, but her eyes had the haunted, distant look of a war veteran. An older man always rubbed his left temple, a constant rhythmic motion as he stared at his photos. We were all islands. The dreams started about a month in. At first, they were just echoes. I dreamed I was standing in the dusty ballroom, and I could smell the decay and dry rot. I'd hear the faint, ghostly echo of a waltz. I woke up feeling unsettled, but dismissed it. My job was to stare at images all day. Of course they'd creep into my subconscious, but they got stronger. After a week spent memorizing a photo of a grim-faced family on a sagging porch in what looked like the Dust Bowl, I had a dream where I was the father. I could feel the rough, splintered wood of the porch railing under my hand, the grit of dust between my teeth, the gnawing, hopeless hunger in my stomach. I felt a desperate, protective love for the women and children beside me, a love so fierce and painful it made my chest ache when I woke up. The day I studied a photo of a collapsed mine entrance, I spent the night dreaming of darkness, the oppressive weight of the earth above me, the taste of coal dust, the chilling subterranean cold that seeps into your bones. I heard the shouts of other men, muffled and terrified, and the groan of shifting rock. I woke up gasping for air, my pajamas soaked in sweat, my throat raw from the screams that had been trapped in my sleeping mind. This had become the new normal. Every night, I was a tourist in someone else's tragedy. I was a soldier in a trench, the mud sucking at my boots, the smell of cordite and fear licking the air. I was a lone woman in a lighthouse, storm winds howling at me like a hungry beast, the waves crashing against the stone with the force of cannonballs. I was a witness to car accidents, fires, arguments steeped in a quiet, venomous rage. I was living 100 different lives, and none of them were my own. My own life began to feel thin and unreal. I'd be walking to the grocery store, and the texture of the modern pavement would feel strange, alien. The bright colors of the cereal aisle seemed garish and loud compared to the sepia and black and white worlds I inhabited every night. My own memories started to get fuzzy. I had to concentrate to remember my college roommate's name, but I could tell you the exact pattern of the rust stains on the hull of a shipwreck I'd studied for 8 hours 3 weeks prior. The first major crack appeared on a Tuesday. I had spent the day with a particularly haunting photograph. It was the street corner, sometime in the late 70s, judging by the cars and clothes. A crowd was gathered, looking at something just out of frame. Their faces were a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. But my focus for 8 hours had been on one man at the edge of the crowd. He was younger, maybe in his early 20s, with a thick mustache and a denim jacket. He wasn't looking at whatever the main event was. He was looking away, his face pale, his eyes wide, with a specific, personal terror. He was the only one who looked truly afraid. That evening, on my way home, I saw him. I was waiting to cross the street, and he was on the other side. Older, of course. His mustache was gray, his face lined with the intervening 40-odd years. But it was him. The same wide-set eyes, the same shape of the jaw. The denim jacket was gone, replaced by a rumpled tweed coat, but it was unmistakably the same man from the photograph. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. It had to be a coincidence, a trick of the light, my overstimulated brain making connections that weren't there. But then he turned his head, and his eyes met mine across the 4 lanes of traffic. Recognition dawned on his face, and then horror, the exact same expression from the photograph. A raw, gut-wrenching terror that seemed to suck all the air out of the space between us. He looked at me as if I were a ghost, as if I were the very thing he'd been running from on that street corner all those years ago. He stumbled backwards, turned, and practically ran, disappearing into the evening crowd. I stood there for a long time, the traffic lights cycling from red to green to red again, the world moving on around me while my own had just ground to a sickening halt. That was when the paranoia began in earnest. The silence of the archive, once peaceful, now felt predatory. The hyper-focus of my colleagues no longer seemed like professional dedication. It looked like a desperate attempt to keep something at bay. I started watching them more closely. The man who rubbed his temple, his hand would sometimes twitch, his fingers splaying as if trying to ward something off. The young woman's haunted eyes would occasionally flick towards an empty space in her corral, her breathing catching for a second before she forced her gaze back to the photo. I had to know what was going on. I broke the cardinal rule. I waited for the temple-rubbing man in the break room. He was nuking a container of what looked like plain rice. I walked up to him, my heart thudding. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding rusty and loud in the quiet room. He flinched. He didn't just turn. He physically recoiled, his back hitting the counter. He looked at me with wide, panicked eyes, shaking his head frantically. He grabbed his rice, the microwave beeping insistently, and almost ran from the room, never once making eye contact. He didn't say a single word. The message was clear. We don't talk. We can't talk. Maybe we're not allowed to talk. Or maybe we're just too afraid of what might happen if we do. Then people started to disappear. One Monday, the corral to my left was empty. The man who sat there, a quiet fellow with thinning hair, was just gone. No one mentioned it. His desk was cleared out as if he never existed. 2 weeks later, the woman with the haunted eyes was gone too. Her corral was also wiped clean. There was no internal memo, no farewell card, just a silent, growing void in our ranks. Were they fired? Did they quit? Or was it something else? I was spiraling. My apartment no longer felt like my own. I'd catch a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision and turn to see a shadow that looked like a soldier in a trench coat. The scent of ozone and rain would fill my room on a clear night, a phantom echo from a photo of a lightning-struck tree. The breakthrough, if you can call it that, came last week. I sat down at my desk and my hand brushed against something taped to the underside. It was a small, folded piece of paper. My blood ran cold. It felt deliberate, clandestine, I waited until my hand stopped shaking, then slipped it into my pocket. I spent the day in a fugue state, staring at a photo of a single withered black rose lying on a cobblestone street, my mind entirely on the note in my pocket. That night, in the privacy of my apartment, I unfolded it. It wasn't a note, not in the traditional sense. It was just a string of alphanumeric characters. A7, B3, C9, D1, E4, F8. I had no idea what it meant. A code? A web address? Then I remembered. Every archivist had a small personal safe in the locker room for valuables. We set our own combinations, but this didn't look like a combination. It looked like a serial number or a key. The next day, I watched The Woman with the Haunted Eyes' Carol. It was still empty. I took a chance. After everyone had left, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, I went to the locker room. I found her locker. Next to the combination dial was a small, almost invisible keyhole. It was an override. This had to be it. I looked for a key, but then it clicked. The sequence was a password for the digital lock on her safe. I typed in the sequence. There was a soft beep and a heavy click. The safe was full of paper, scraps, notebooks, loose leaf sheets filled with a frantic, spidery handwriting. It was forbidden knowledge. The one thing we were never, ever supposed to do. She had been writing it all down. I took it all, stuffed it in my bag, and ran. I've spent the last 3 days poring over her notes. It's not a single coherent narrative. It's the fragmented, desperate research of a brilliant, terrified mind. There are clippings from obscure historical journals, printouts from physics forums, and pages of her own synthesis. And I finally understand. According to her notes, certain moments in time, certain places, are so saturated with trauma or violence or some powerful paradoxical emotion that they create a kind of scar on reality, a resonance. She used a lot of terms I barely understood: quantum entanglement, temporal feedback loops, mnemonic resonance, but the term she kept circling, the one she'd scrawled over and over in the margins, was genius loci, spirit of place, but she'd added her own qualifier: genius loci malignum. These aren't just memories of bad events. They are the events themselves, still echoing. They are the moments that have become sentient, predatory. A murder that was so brutal, it imprinted itself on the room, and now the room itself flashes out at anyone who enters. A paradox, like a man who appears in the photograph of his own grandfather's unit years before he was born, creating a loop that attracts things, unwanted attention from outside. These are glitches in the fabric of the universe, hauntings of a moment, of a place, of an idea. The Foundation's job is to find these glitches. They capture them, and the way they capture a rogue moment, a sentient memory, is to take a photograph. The photograph acts as a physical anchor, a key, but it's unstable. The note explained the process. Step 1. The photograph isolates the entity. It traps the genius loci in a single static image. Step 2. The archivist, through intense, prolonged focus, transfers the anchor from the photograph into their own consciousness. Our photographic memories, our ability to absorb every single detail, it's a prerequisite for the cage to work. We memorize the image so completely that our mind becomes the new vessel. Step 3. The photograph is incinerated. This destroys the original physical anchor, leaving the entity trapped entirely within the mind of the archivist. It has nowhere else to go. We are prisons, human prisons for things that should never exist. The motto, "Some things are best remembered," is a cruel, literal joke. They are remembered by us, and only us, so that the rest of the world can forget, so that these malevolent echoes can't bleed out and harm anyone else. The few suffer for the many. The woman's journal entries chronicled her decline. October 12th. Archived, the boardwalk collapse. I can still hear the screams when it's quiet. Sometimes I smell the salt water and the fried dough. November 4th. Saw the arsonist from the warehouse fire photo on the subway today. He looked right at me and smiled. It wasn't a human smile. December 19th. My sister came to visit. For a second, her face wasn't her face. It was the face of the porcelain doll from that abandoned nursery photo. I screamed. She thinks I'm having a breakdown. January 8th. I have archived 112 anomalies. There isn't much room left for me in here. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I know the exact number of buttons on the coat of a man who vanished from a ship in 1924. Her last entry was short. They're getting out. They're leaking. The cage is full. I archived almost 200 of them now. 200 of these things. And the cage is full. My cage is full. My reality is fraying at the seams. Last night, I was making tea, and for a full minute, my kitchen wasn't my kitchen. It was a cold, tiled morgue from a photo I'd studied months ago. The man from the 70th Street corner. I see him everywhere now. In crowds. His face always twisted in that same silent scream, always looking right at me. The walls of my apartment sometimes ripple and show me the peeling wallpaper of a Victorian seance room. The static on the radio whispers words in a language I don't know, but understand with a cold dread. I think now that I am a walking, talking containment unit that has breached, and the entities I hold are starting to leak into the world around me. The other day, my landlord knocked on my door to ask about a water leak, and he flinched when he saw me. He said, "Sorry, for a second there you looked like someone else. A lot of someone else's." He left without another word, his face pale. I found myself in my bathroom 2 nights ago, holding a bottle of pills. It felt like the most logical, rational thought I'd had in months. If I end, they end with me. The memories, the things wearing the skins of memories, they all get erased. It would be a release for me and the world. But as I was about to do it, the supervisor's voice echoed in my head. "You will become the living record." And I realized with a sudden, freezing certainty that this is what they want. This is the end of the job cycle. It's the Foundation's retirement plan. They hire us, they fill us up with these horrors until we break, and then we retire ourselves. It's clean, efficient, and it completes the final incineration. So now, I'm trapped. I can't go on like this. I'm losing myself. My own memories feel like old, faded photographs compared to the vivid, high-definition nightmares I'm forced to carry. But I can't kill myself, because that's playing their game. That's letting them win. That's doing their dirty work for them. Is there another way? Can you fight a memory? Can you exercise an event? I'm sitting in my apartment right now. The lights are flickering. In the reflection of the dark screen, my face is a flickering montage of 100 others. A soldier, a bride, a factory worker, a terrified man on the street corner. The hum of the building sounds like a waltz, then like the roar of a fire, then like the howl of a storm at sea. They are all in here, and they want to get out. What do I do? I'd like to make a special shout out to the Supreme Frank, Reddit user GamalFrank, for allowing me to narrate his story. Please visit his page on Reddit for more stories like this. Some stories end when the words stop. Others don't end at all. If you enjoyed this story, there are many more waiting in the dark. Until next time.